The people who build those gorgeous $150,000 camper vans have a secret they will never admit on camera. A lot of the professional builders charging six figures for a Mercedes Sprinter conversion drive home at night in a $6,000 Chevy Express because they've figured out the one thing this industry needs you to never notice, the part of a van that actually keeps you warm, dry, mobile, and free costs almost nothing. What separates a luxury build from a cheap fleet van is mostly the badge on the grille, the cedar paneling in the photos, and the lifestyle plastered all over social media. Underneath, the metal box is often nearly identical. Sometimes the cheap van is better because it skips the temperamental turbo diesel and the fragile electronics that strand people on desert highways in the first place. So this video is one I've wanted to make for a long time. 5 real vans you can find on any used lot or classifieds page this week. Vans the van life crowd walks right past because they're plain, unfashionable, and cheap. And if you know which models and which years to grab, they are absolute gold mines for living in. These vans outperform their price by a mile while the famous names spend your money on marketing and daydreams. By the end of this, you'll know how to put together a complete, genuinely livable home on wheels for less than the tax bill on a new Sprinter. One rule first, though, because once you have it, the markup never works on you again. The rule is this. When you buy a van to live in, you are paying for two completely separate things, and they have nothing to do with each other. The first is the machine, the engine, the transmission, the axles, the steel shell that keeps rain off your head. The second is the image, the tall European silhouette, the badge, the feeling you get when your van looks like the ones in the travel videos. The industry's whole trick is blurring those two into one, convincing you that a van which photographs beautifully on a cliff in Utah must also be a better place to live. It isn't. A bulletproof drivetrain can sit under faded white fleet paint for $5,000, and a fragile, expensive one can sit under beautiful gray metallic for $70,000. Learn to pull the machine apart from the fashion, and the price tags in this market stop making sense in your favor. These 5 vans are exactly where that happens. Number 1. The Chevy Express and its twin, the GMC Savana. This van never pretended to be a lifestyle, and that's its superpower. The Express was built for plumbers, electricians, airport shuttles, and prison transport. General Motors has been making essentially the same van since the mid-90s. Under the hood sits one of the simplest, most understood engines in America, an old-school pushrod V8 that any mechanic in any small town has worked on 100 times. Parts sit on the shelf of every auto parts store from Florida to Alaska, and they cost a fraction of European van parts because they're shared with millions of Chevy trucks. So why does everyone scroll past it? Because it looks like a work van. It is one. Rubber floors, steel wheels, and the aerodynamics of a refrigerator. Van life influencers ignore it completely, and that keeps the price down for you. A retired Fleet Express with solid maintenance records often sells for less than the cabinetry in a luxury build. The trick is what you buy. Look for the 2,500 or 3,500 versions, the heavier duty ones, because they carry a full living build without sagging. And look for fleet-maintained examples, the ones with the boring service binder, because a boring binder is the most beautiful thing in the used van world. Government surplus auctions and utility company sales are full of these. Vans that got an oil change every 3,000 miles whether they needed it or not, because a fleet manager's job depended on it. 150,000 miles on one of these engines is barely broken in, and the money you save on the purchase buys a decade of maintenance with change left over. Nobody ignores the Express because it's bad. They ignore it because it never learned to pose for photos. And that oversight keeps thousands of dollars in your pocket. Number 2. The Ford E-Series. The E150, E250, and E350. Ask a fleet mechanic, off the clock, what he'd actually live in, and this is usually the answer. You'll barely find it discussed online because there is nothing dramatic to say about a van that simply runs, which is exactly the point. Ford built these for over half a century, and for most of that time, the E-Series was the best-selling full-size van in America. Churches ran them, ambulance companies ran them, the phone company ran them, because the vans refused to die. The E-Series sits on truck bones, a heavy frame, big brakes, and engines like the 4.6 and 5.4-liter V8s that routinely see 300,000 miles on basic oil changes. Now connect two things almost nobody puts together. When you live in a van, the scariest cost isn't the purchase price. It's the breakdown 1,000 miles from home. A rare European van waits weeks for a part shipped to a specialist shop. An E-Series gets fixed the same afternoon in a farm town because the mechanic's own airport shuttle in the parking lot is the same van. For living in, hunt the E250 and E350 because the payload swallows a bed, water, batteries, and cabinets without complaint. Extended body versions give you nearly the floor length of the big Euro vans for a third of the money. And one bonus move almost nobody makes. Retired ambulances are built on this exact E350 platform, and they leave the factory with heavy insulation, interior cabinets, work lighting, and a serious electrical system already installed. Then they sell at auction for scrap-adjacent prices because nobody wants to be seen in one. Paint it, and you've skipped half the build. Ford never sold this van with a lifestyle attached. Fleet managers bought it for 50 straight years for one boring reason. It starts every single morning. Number 3. The Chevy Astro and its twin, the GMC Safari. This one might make you smile when I say it. And that reaction is precisely why it's still cheap. The Astro is the boxy little mid-size van from the 80s and 90s that your neighbor used for hauling lumber and grandkids. It's been out of production for 2 decades, it costs almost nothing, and the modern van scene would prefer you keep thinking of it as beneath you. What the Astro hides in plain sight is a spec sheet that embarrasses vans costing 20 times more. It's body-on-frame tough like a truck, rear-wheel drive, and it was offered with factory all-wheel drive, which means a $2,000 Astro can crawl up snowy forest roads that stop a rear-drive Sprinter cold. It's small enough to park on any city street without a second glance, which makes it one of the great stealth camping vans ever made. And it still fits a proper bed, a cooking shelf, and storage underneath. People pay a fortune for new adventure vans to get exactly 2 things: all-wheel drive and the ability to disappear in plain sight. This forgotten grocery getter has quietly offered both for the price of a used riding mower. Number 4. The Ram ProMaster. This is where the expensive end of the market should start feeling nervous because the used numbers are almost unfair. The ProMaster is the Euro-style van nobody brags about. The Sprinter has the badge, the Transit has the fan base, and the ProMaster has the delivery contracts. And delivery contracts are exactly why the used market is flooded with them at prices thousands below the other two. The part that matters for living in it is width. The ProMaster has the widest cargo body of the big 3, wide enough that most adults can sleep sideways across the van, which saves you 2 feet of floor length and effectively gives you a bigger home in a shorter vehicle. It's front-wheel drive, so there's no drive shaft running under the floor, which means the load floor sits lower than the competition, and the high-roof version gives well over 6 feet of standing height inside. And if your knees and your back have started voicing opinions, a low step-in and real stand-up headroom will improve your daily life more than any badge ever could. Stand up straight, walk to your bed, cook at a counter at proper height. That's the entire luxury van experience. And on the used market, a high-roof former delivery ProMaster often costs less than half of an equivalent Sprinter. Why doesn't everyone know this? Because nobody brags about a delivery van, so the conversation stays glued to the 3-pointed star while the square white box does the same job for half the money. And the ownership math keeps working after the purchase. The ProMaster runs a gas V6 shared with millions of ordinary Chrysler vehicles, so there's no diesel emission system waiting to hand you a 4-figure repair bill, and any corner shop can service it. The front-wheel drive layout even gives it a turning circle tighter than vans half its size, which you'll appreciate the first time you thread a full-size home through a crowded gas station. Look for the high-roof 2,500 and 3,500 versions. Hunt the fleet auctions and the listings with the delivery shelving still bolted in, and let somebody else's brand loyalty pay for your kitchen. Now, before the last van, one thing applies to every single vehicle on this list: cheap or expensive. A van is a thin metal box, and on a January night, that box gets brutally cold, faster than most first-timers ever expect. Your diesel heater can fail, or your battery can die at 2 in the morning in a Walmart parking lot, and that is the moment that separates the people who planned from the people who hope. The experienced van dwellers I know all carry some version of the same insurance, a dedicated emergency thermal layer that needs no power and no fuel. The one I keep coming back to is the TerraShell Emergency Bivy, a reflective thermal sleeping bag in a small stuffed sack about the size of a soda can, small enough to live in the door pocket year-round. If the heat ever dies, you climb inside your normal bedding, pull the TerraShell over the top, and it bounces roughly 90% of your own body heat straight back at you. It costs about as much as a tank of gas. It weighs 4 ounces, and it turns the worst night of your van life into an inconvenience instead of an emergency. The link is in the description below if you want to look at it. It's the single cheapest piece of genuine peace of mind in this whole video, and it works in any van, including the fancy ones. All right, one van left, and it might be the best deal of all. Number 5, the 90s high-top conversion van. I kept this one for the end because if you're around my age, this van isn't just a bargain, it's familiar. These are the Chevy G20S, Ford Econolines, and Dodge B-Series vans that companies transformed in the 80s and 90s with raised fiberglass roofs, captain's chairs, wood trim, curtains, and a fold-flat rear sofa bed. Your neighbor probably had one in the driveway. Generations of American families took their vacations in these vans long before #van life came along to sell the same idea back to you for $140,000, and they're still out there, still cheap, still doing exactly what they always did, and almost everyone under 60 has forgotten they exist. The reason they're such a steal is simple. A conversion van is a build that's already finished. The high top gives you headroom. The walls come insulated and upholstered from the factory. The windows have curtains. The sofa already folds into a bed, and many came with auxiliary batteries and reading lights from day one. The work that costs a modern builder $20,000 in materials and 6 months of weekends was done 30 years ago by professionals. And today, the whole package trades hands for the price of a used golf cart, because a market obsessed with the newest thing dismisses a van this old as your uncle's relic. The one thing to check carefully is the seam where that fiberglass top meets the steel roof, because a 30-year-old seal can weep in the rain, and water stains on the headliner tell you everything the seller won't. Find one that lived in a dry garage in a dry state, and you have a turnkey home for pocket change. These vans aren't relics, they're survivors, and nothing survives 3 decades of family road trips by accident. And that's the list. The Chevy Express for cheap, fix-anywhere muscle. The Ford E-Series for half a century of fleet-proven reliability. The Astro and Safari for all-wheel drive stealth at lawnmower prices. The ProMaster for stand-up, walk-around space without the badge tax. And the 90s conversion van, a finished, furnished home that was right all along. Now watch how this assembles, because individually these are good vans, but the real power is how cheaply they become a complete life on the road. Start with the van itself, say a clean fleet E250 or a used high-roof ProMaster. Add a simple platform bed built from framing lumber and plywood with storage bins sliding underneath. Insulate the walls and ceiling with sheep wool or rigid foam board, the single highest value job in any build. Cut in one roof vent fan for airflow, because moisture, not cold, is what ruins vans and sleep. Add a basic power station and a folding solar panel, a camp stove, a water jug with a foot pump, and a small diesel heater for winter, with that TerraShell bivy tucked in the door as your no-power backup. Now run the honest numbers. Call it $5,000 to $8,000 for a solid van, a few hundred for the bed lumber, a few hundred more for insulation, several hundred for the roof fan, and roughly $1,000 for power, heat, and cooking combined. A solid van, a real bed, insulation, ventilation, power, water, cooking, and 2 layers of heat, and you're on the road, genuinely comfortable, for roughly $10,000 all in, less than the upholstery option on a luxury build. Add it up and you land on the entire point of this video. The full setup costs less than the down payment the dealership wanted, and it works at least as well, often better because your money went into the machine instead of the marketing. Now some honesty, because I'm not your mechanic, and I won't pretend there's no fine print. Cheap doesn't automatically mean good. There are rotten cheap vans and worthwhile expensive ones, and the skill is knowing which specific examples are the gems, which is exactly why I told you what to look for in each one. Rust is the killer, especially on anything from the salt belt, so crawl underneath with a flashlight or pay a mechanic $100 for a pre-purchase inspection before you hand over a dime. That $100 is the best money in this entire process. High mileage on a fleet V8 with records is fine. High mileage with no records and fresh undercoating spray hiding the frame is a walkaway. And if a van needs a transmission and a fuel system, the cheap van has just become the expensive one. So build a repair cushion into whatever you spend. If someone insists that price tells you how livable a van is, they either haven't shopped this market or they're holding a brochure. The bigger takeaway has nothing to do with these 5 models. It's a way of reading the whole market. Once you see that the machine and the image are priced separately, the salesman loses his favorite customer, the one who shops with his eyes instead of his checklist. You walk past the gleaming Sprinter at the front of the lot, you ignore the adventure decals, and you go straight to the frame, the records, and the drivetrain, and you pick the boring white box that delivers them without the markup. That habit is worth more than any single van because it works on every lot, every auction, and every classified listing for the rest of your life. One lost sale doesn't worry the conversion companies. A customer who inspects frames instead of admiring paneling worries them because that customer never comes back to overpay. If this was useful, put it to work this week. Pull up your local listings, search one van from this list, and see the prices for yourself. Then tell me in the comments the most you've ever spent, or nearly spent, on a camper or conversion, and whether the cheap route ever crossed your mind. I read everyone, and those answers shape what I make next. And subscribe now, because next week, I'm putting a $7,000 van, line by line, against the $130,000 build it nearly matches. Real listings, real numbers, the actual breakdowns the conversion companies hope you never see. They are not going to enjoy that one.